Hello everyone, I'm Trevor Wanamaker, and you may know me from my YouTube channel, Maker Experiment, where I focus on creating helpful content for laser owners like yourselves. Now, I've been using a laser since about 2013, and since that time, I've learned lots of tips and tricks along the way. And about 3 years ago, I started getting into UV printing and started combining the two together to create unique projects such as keychains, awards, signage, and so much more. Now, I'm not an expert in UV printing, but I do like to combine the two using print and cut methods. And today, I'm joined by Epilogue to bring you a webinar on print and cut using both the camera system and registration dots, as well as how to do it without a camera. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. In this webinar, we're going to focus on how to set up your design files for perfect alignment, both from the print side as well as the laser side. Tips for printing with a UV printer and how to get a print that will last. Techniques for accurate print and cut registration. Now remember, it's going to be both with the camera and a tip and trick to do it if you don't have a camera. And then some pro tips and tricks for avoiding some common pitfalls. Now, along the way, there's a key thing here about print and cut that I want you to keep in mind. Print and cut can unlock a lot of options for designs, for making something unique, and making it look very professional. Now, think of die-cut stickers. It's the same concept where you want your logo or your design to be printed, and you want your item to be die-cut in the same shape as that design. You don't want it to look like a random circle or a square. You really want it to have that premium feel. And that's what we're heading for with the print and cut method. In this webinar, we're going to be focusing on two pieces of major equipment that you're going to need, as well as a couple pieces of software. First and foremost, you're going to need a laser. In this one, I'm going to be using my Epilogue Fusion Pro 48 that has a registration dot camera with it. And if you're not using Epilogue, I highly recommend them because they've always been a great piece of machinery since the last 13 years that I've been using them. The second piece of equipment that you're going to need is a UV printer. For those of you that don't know what a UV printer is, it is a printer that will print directly onto substrates such as acrylic, wood, leather, and many other materials. You're going to need that to add the color pop that we like to see in a lot of the print and cut applications. You're also going to need two major pieces of software. One is your design software. I personally like to use Adobe Illustrator. You can also use CorelDRAW or Affinity Designer, something similar to those. But you want to make sure that it is a vector software as much as possible because it allows for scaling of your designs much more easily. The second piece of software you're going to need typically comes with your printer, which is going to be your RIP software. This is the software that communicates with the printer to be able to actually print out your designs so that you can then take it over to your laser. So make sure that you have those two, or if you're just interested in watching the webinar in general, those are the two pieces of equipment that are typically used when you're talking about print and cut applications. I want to share a couple of tips before I get started. And I kind of already shared one of them. Number one is you don't actually need a registration camera to do print and cut applications, but it is much easier to do it with the camera. Number two, make sure that your firmware on your laser is up to date. If you haven't done it in a while, it's always good, I'd say every couple of months, to check and see if an updated firmware has been released. Because you never know when they make updates to the software that will actually communicate with the laser, that will make print and cut easier, but also other things on your laser. The third thing that I would do before doing print and cut applications is make sure that you calibrate your cameras. You don't have to do this all the time, and typically you shouldn't only have to do it once or twice. But I would calibrate them to make sure that it has been done and that you are getting accurate results every time. If you don't calibrate them, there is a chance that it can be shifted off a little bit, and you don't want that to happen. So to avoid the frustration ahead of time, make sure they are calibrated before you get started. Another tip is, while you can do print and cut, meaning you print it and then you align it with registration dots and then cut everything out on the laser, you can do the reverse, which means you can go ahead and cut all the shapes, print outlines on your printer, and then stick them down one by one. This is not the most efficient way to do it, but it is an option if you feel comfortable doing it that way instead. And another thing is, when you're doing this, make sure that whatever you are doing the print and cut on, you are printing it to a piece of material that your laser is capable of handling size-wise. Meaning you don't want to print on an 18-inch by 24-inch piece of material and then stick it into a 12-inch by 24-inch laser. You want to make sure that whatever you're printing fits the bed size of your laser so that you're not going to have any problems trying to cut things out. So with those tips in mind, let's head over to the computer and I will show you a few tips and tricks in the software for making sure that you get a quality, durable print. Before we just jump straight into the printing and cutting aspects, I do want to walk through how to set up the design because I have a couple of tips for you that will really help you along the way. First and foremost, if you are going to be using a registration dot camera with the Epilog Fusion Pro, you are going to have to put registration marks into your design. For this, I am going to be using a black circle that is about 0.25 or a quarter inch in diameter. So you'll see that in the design, and then I'm also going to be using my own logo so that I can make some magnets. If we look here on my screen, you will see that I do have that registration dot. You are going to need 2. When I do my design, I typically put 4 just because force of habit from the past, but I do like having 4 of them because I can do some double checking along the way and make sure that everything is placed where I want. So I typically use 4, it just helps me personally with alignment, but you have to have a minimum of 2. And then I have my design. So I have the full color logo that I'm going to print on the UV printer, and then I have my red line for where I am going to cut the actual magnet. Here is my tip. If you want to fill out the entire artboard, this is a 12 by 24 inch artboard. I am going to actually use a repeat function in Adobe Illustrator. To do this, you're going to select both the logo and the border. I'm going to go up to Object. I'm going to go down to Repeat, and then I'm going to select Grid. So once I do that, you will see it pops into place. And you may be wondering, well, what do I do from here? This is where you go back to Object, go down to Repeat, and select Options. This is where you will get a dialog box to help you with spacing as well as setup. When I do this, if I'm going horizontally and I want to stagger them to fit the most that I can, I'm going to choose the grid type of brick by row. If I wanted to do it vertically and I had this tilted 90 degrees, I would be choosing the brick by column. So if I click on these, this is the first one, which is the grid in general. It doesn't really combine and kind of nest them very well, so it leaves a lot of wasted space. The row will nest them better, and then the column does it in a vertical sense. So that's why I choose the row version. Next, I'm going to actually minimize the space in between until I can get them as close as I possibly can without overlapping them. This will make sure that I can print and cut as many as possible. And then you can do left to right spacing, but you'll see that if I go down any, it actually merges. So I'm going to go and take that back to the default. And as long as they're not touching, you should be good to go. I'm going to click OK. And now you're probably wondering, well, how do I fill up the whole artboard? This is where you grab this little slot shaped white part and just drag it out. And I go a little bit beyond the artboard, and then I'm going to go do the same on the bottom one. And now I'm going to try to shift them to fit as many as I can, such as that. And now you have the entire artboard filled. The downside of this is, well, you have a whole bunch of stuff on the outside. A quick solution to this, if I zoom out just a hair, is if you select the object, you go to Object and Expand, and click OK. It will then break up that item so that you can no longer expand it and create more instances. Then you're going to right-click, select Release Clipping Mask, and this will pop up with all the pieces that you had cut off before. And then if you do it one more time, select Ungroup after the right click, and then you should be able to select any one instance. And this is where you can just go through, select a bunch of them, delete them, select a bunch of them, delete them, and get rid of anything that goes outside of the artboard. And this I have found to be the easiest way to fill the whole artboard, because this gives me proper spacing, it lets me nest them as much as I can, and it makes it super quick. Now, it seems like extra steps because you design more than you need, and then you actually take away, but this is definitely the fastest way that I have found to do it. An alternative method, so if I just had one of these instances, is to copy and paste and then drag it. Another option is to hold down the Alt key and then drag while holding the Shift key, and you can drag an instance like that. And you can select multiple and do that again, and then you can fill up the whole artboard. By doing that, it's just taking a lot of time. You're gonna have to figure out how to space them. So definitely a pro tip here, use some kind of repeat function or a pattern function in order to be able to fill up the whole artboard quickly. You'll see that if I wasn't actually trying to inform you how to do it, that whole operation takes less than a minute, maybe 2 minutes at most, to set up the whole artboard for the design. After you set up your design file with a number of instances and the registration marks, you are going to need to set up 2 different versions of the file. One is going to have to be the version for printing, and then one is going to be the version for cutting. A pro tip here, you do have to have one single artboard for the registration dot process within the Epilogue software. If you try to do 2 different artboards and have them in the same file, it will be tough to get that to work with the registration dot camera. So my suggestion is I usually save one version for print because it's a different orientation, and then I save one version for the laser because of it. Now, my printer is a LogoJet printer, and the way that it is set up is it goes 18 inches wide by 24 inches tall. So it's a portrait or vertical format. And then my laser is a landscape format. So that's why I set up 2 different files. The next step in order to get this from the design that I have, the whole thing combined, to a design that I can print and cut, I am going to show you how to do it in the same orientation. So I'm actually going to use the portrait orientation so that it meets my printer needs. And I will show you kind of how to hack that as a tip in the Epilogue software so that you don't have to do the redesign and have one file in landscape and one file in portrait. It is a lot easier if you save them out separately, but I'll show you how to do it with the same orientation in case you are not using a camera and you want them in one file. Here's one of the tips that I kind of hinted at before is I typically keep my print file and my laser file separate. If I am going to be using the camera, because your registration dot camera, again, cannot read a multiple artboard file. And the other thing is, if you have a single artboard file with multiple layers, which is a great way to design, I have not found a good way in my print software to where the entire layer structure doesn't show up on a single print. The only way I have effectively found to get the printer software to recognize and be able to turn things off and on to be able to print only what I want is by having multiple artboards. So we're going to take this and I'm going to start a new file. So file new, I'm going to pick a 12-inch wide by 24-inch tall because that is the size of my material. Okay, that's my new file. I'm going to then copy everything from this file into that new one and paste it. And I will just rotate it by grabbing the corner, holding down the shift key to lock the angle at 90 degrees. And you'll see that it's pretty much spot on to the artboard. Here is where you have to differentiate a little bit. If I'm setting this up for printing, I do not want the red border because I want the red border to be the cut. I don't want to actually print the red onto the magnet. I want that to be where the laser is doing its work. So I need to get rid of the red for the printer file. So typically what I do at this point is I go ahead and save a version of this as a print version and then a version as the laser version, and then I will make my edits. But here, you'll see that if I select an item, it is completely combined. If I drag it, it pulls the border and the print. I need to separate that in order to be able to manipulate either the print or the cutting border. So I'm going to select all of the logos, right click and say ungroup, and then you'll be able to grab just the red border. Once I have one of these selected, I will go to select, same, and then pick stroke color. And this will select all of the borders so that if I did a Control X to cut, I get rid of every cutting border immediately, very quickly, which is awesome. Now, a tip here is I can have all those selected, select the registration dots by holding down the shift key and clicking on those dots. And just as a test, if I were to hit Control X, you'll see that all of those disappear. What I'm going to do in this case is I can do Control C and copy it, open up a new file since I didn't save any copies yet, select the same exact 12-inch wide by 24-inch tall, and then do a Control Shift V, and that is my cutting file. Very simple, and it took a few seconds. If I go back to this one, all I have to do is then deselect, again, hold down the shift key, deselect the registration dots, and then just hit delete. And there's your print file. So once you've done the structure and you've got everything patterned out, it's only about a minute to select what you need, copy, paste, and set up one for print and one for cut. And that's all there is to it from an Adobe Illustrator design aspect. Then what we need to do is we'll save both of these files so that we have them for our own purposes. And we will move on to the printing side. Once you've got the files designed, go ahead and save them out as laser and print. and this will help you in the next steps. Now I'm going to switch to focus on the UV printing side of the webinar. This is where you're going to actually print out the design onto your material. And if you have never used the UV printer, it can print directly onto whatever you're going to be using within reason. There are some materials it doesn't work great with, but I usually use acrylic and wood and magnetic sheets and leatherette, things like that, and it prints really well. For this video, I'm going to be using the Laser Mag material from Romark. It is metallic, and I'll actually show you an example here where this is one where I did a gold version, and this is the gold Laser Mag material with my logo printed on it. This is where I'm going to actually use a silver version and make more of these because I started to run out of them. The Laser Mag material works really great with the UV ink, and there will be some prep work I will show you when it gets to the actual printing stage, but I want to focus on the print software. To me, when I design for UV printing, I do the majority of the work in Adobe Illustrator, and just like my epilogue, I just use the print software as a conduit to send it to the printer. Just like on the epilogue, I only use the dashboard as the conduit to send it to the laser. I don't like to mess with the instances and the spacing and all those other things you can do with the print software. I like to set that up in Adobe because it's more familiar to me. So that's really a tip from me, is do a lot of your design in the software you are most comfortable with. For me, that is Adobe Illustrator. For some of you, that's going to be CorelDRAW. But just make sure that you know how to do your instances and spacing and staggering, because it will save you a lot of headaches and it will turn out the same way. So I would definitely suggest you just stick with what you're comfortable with. In my software, so this is Print Pro, I'm going to click the open button and select my magnets print version of my file. When I do this, it will bring it in, and I can click the little check mark button here. If you had multiple artboards, you can select multiple artboards and then it would bring them all in, but this is the one. And this is where I say it's just a lot easier to have it already designed, because I can quickly go from here and select a print profile. Most companies will help you set up print profiles when they set up your printer with you. That is what has happened here. LogoJet has provided some profiles for flat material. I am going to choose the one that is 720 by 1200 white plus color bidirectional. You may be asking yourself, why would I do this? And the answer is very simply, it depends on what you're printing on. If you're going to be printing on a dark material or a material like this metallic, where you really want to get a solid base before you lay the color, you're going to want a white underbase. A good example of where I do not use the white underbase is if I am printing onto white acrylic. You don't really need that white underbase for light colors or things that aren't going to show through. And the white base is really for that. Is it to stop whatever the material is from showing through your print? And in this case, because it's a Laser Mag material and it's metallic, I have noticed that if I print the ink and the color straight onto the metallic stuff, it doesn't kind of give the pop that I expect, and it's a little bit duller. So I recommend that you print a white underbase before you print the color onto this Laser Mag material. After that, I'm going to click Print Setup. And here, just make sure again that it matches what we said. The profiles are typically set up to be pretty standard. And the only thing I really look at this point is the properties. The properties here, make sure that it lists out your channels properly. I have both white and clear ink as well as the color ink. I'm going to go to the layer selection, and this is where you can set up how it prints your item. You can do it a lot of different ways, and I have a tip that I like to use, and you don't need to do this because it's technically less efficient, but I like this method because it helps me verify that it turned out the way that I want. And what I mean by that is the first thing I print is just the white. I like to print out the white by itself to make sure that that got all the way through before I lay any color. It is not the most efficient method to do this, but I have had instances, and it's not the printer's fault. It's usually like the material shifted or something happened, or I forgot to replace the ink bag or something like that. So what I do is I do just the white. I'll uncheck the color, and then I will click OK again, and then I would just hit Control P and click OK and send it to the printer. And I'll do that here in a minute. And I will lay down the just white version of this to make sure I get a nice, good coat and underbase for my color print. Now, the most efficient way to do this is to do all of your stuff in one print. What I would do, if you want to do this, is do your white, and then I would choose your color on your second layer. And then if you want an extra protective layer on your print, you can choose the clear as your layer 3. Little tip here too, the clear layer can slightly change the vibrancy or result of the color layer. You might get a lot of color pop without the clear, and then when you lay the clear on, it doesn't have a lot of effect, but you might see it be a little less vibrant when you add that clear. At least I've noticed that in the past. So it's really kind of a choice on what you prefer. I do find that the clear coat helps the print last longer, especially if you're going to be handling whatever item it is that you're going to be printing onto. With these being magnets, you're probably not going to, I would say, handle them a lot other than when you first put them wherever they're going to go. So you don't really need the clear layer, but you can have it if you want. So just to recap on the print side, the tip that I have is I print my white and then I print my color. But if you want to do it all in one job to be more efficient, I would do the white underbase, the color is layer 2, and optional, your clear is layer 3 to get all of it done in one shot. Then you would click OK again, do Control P, and then click OK to print. And that's all there is to actually sending the job from the software to the printer. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and we're going to print it out, and I will show you how that turns out so that we can go to the next step of actually cutting them out on the laser. Quick tip when you're going to be printing on something like this laser mag is I like to clean off the surface of the material with 99% isopropyl alcohol. So just take a little bit of it, get it on a microfiber cloth or one of these lint-free type towels, and just clean the overall surface of it. Get all the dust and grime off before we set it in its final position. This will help get rid of a lot of dust and grime and little particles that can make your print have issues adhering to the material. So make sure that you do that and clean any kind of material that you're going to print on just to make sure you get rid of oils, residues, all those types of things. For tip number 2, you're going to notice that right now I can shift this material pretty much anywhere I want. So what I'm going to be doing is either you use your fan like this and it will keep it in place, or if you have it, you can buy a sticky mat, and these are great for laser use as well, to where you can stick the materials on this and it will stick to it. This is basically a giant sticker mat. So either the sticker mat or using your vacuum table, one of those two things will help you hold down your material. The downside of the fan is it can be a little bit noisy and difficult to record, but it will keep your material in place. For tip number 3, you're going to want gloves because we're going to be applying an adhesion promoter. Now, I do not suggest you do this without gloves as it can irritate your skin. Make sure you shake it really well. This one is just the LogoJet brand because it's what I have. But by using an adhesion promoter, it will help the ink stick to the material better for a longer period of time, making it last longer overall. I am going to turn the fan on for this, so it's going to be a little noisy. But same thing, you apply some to a cloth, and you're just going to spread it just like you did when you cleaned off your material. But this time, with the fan on, the material is not going to move, making sure that it's secure in place. Make sure you cover the whole thing. And then wait for it to dry so that you can actually print on the material. And once your material is ready, you're just going to send the print job over from the computer and it will start working. Now that we've wrapped up printing onto the laser mag material, this is the result. I did already have a spot cut out here from a previous one, so I didn't print there. But we're going to take this. You can see the registration.camera spot is printed in the corner, and we have the other ones as well. The next step for this is we're going to take this sheet and put it into the Epilog laser. With this, I like to put it kind of in the center of the bed when it's the Pro model that is bigger with the registration.camera, because the overhead cameras work a lot better if you are right underneath of them to start the recognition process. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the laser and then walk you through the registration.process within the Epilog software. So let's go ahead and get to that step next. I've gone ahead and put the material into the laser. The next step is to actually print the cutting file over to the dashboard software. So I'm simply going to hit print. It will send it over to the software. Here, I'm just going to say send to job manager because you're going to need the job manager for the camera part of the registration.process. I'm going to then click on that job. And here is where we're going to start setting up some of the settings. So I do have an extra file in here that I'm not going to be using. I'm just going to turn that off. The red, I do have a setting that I'm going to import, which is a vector setting for my laser mag material. If you are going to be doing this process as well, the settings that I'm going to be using for my 120 watt laser is actually 10% speed, 10% power, and 100% frequency. These may or may not work for you in your machine, but might give you some good guidance. The black one is where I'm going to go ahead and click on registration. And this is where we're going to flip the orientation of the file that we sent over from Adobe. So in this picture in the top right-hand corner, you will see that it is the left side of the file. If I want to rotate this, it's going to end up being the bottom left corner of my print. So I'm going to zoom into the bottom left with the scroll of my mouse, click in the middle of the dot, scroll back out, and then choose next in the guide is the top right. So I'm going to go ahead and click for the top right. And then I need to go ahead and confirm and print. So here I'm going to confirm this, and it will launch into the registration.camera process. This whole process takes probably 30 seconds to 2 minutes, somewhere in that range. What it is doing is if you have the registration dot on your laser, it is attached to the laser head area. So the overhead cameras are actually used for picking your points, and then that registration dot camera is used to go to that point, look for it, and then it will hunt to the next point and look for that one. Once it finds those two, it will then automatically send the job over to the laser, which it has done here, and that window will disappear. Once that window disappears, it means that that job has been sent over to your laser and you need to go over there and print it out. So there is no great visual cue that, hey, it's done, go ahead and look. It just disappears from that window, and that is your trigger. With that being said, let's go over to the laser and I will show you the next step of simply pressing the button and enjoying your print and cut results. Once you're over at the laser, the job will show up. You just make sure you select that job and then hit the go button and we'll start cutting. The job just finished. It took about 14 minutes overall. And what we're going to do is lift them up. They should fall out pretty easily. They will have a little bit of residue on them. Here's how it turned out from the print and cut operation. It does have some residue just because this laser mag material will have that residue on it. You'll just have to wipe them down with a cloth or rag of some kind and they'll be good to go. But overall, nice perfect cut using the registration dot camera. Really good alignment. I really like how these turned out. Overall, the process for print and cut using the registration dot camera is super simple. Once you've got it down, you've got your cameras calibrated, you got everything dialed in, it is a very fast process. For those of you that don't have the registration dot camera, maybe you're using the Epilog Fusion Edge or Maker and you don't have that camera built in, there is still a really easy way to do the print and cut option without that camera. The easiest way to do this is when you are setting up your software, instead of doing the actual black circle as I would say a registration mark in the software, you're going to turn that into a cutting line when you send it to the laser. So when I sent the job over with the registration version, I had filled in black circles because the camera was going to look for those. The only thing you need to change about the process is turn those into outlines instead of the solid fills and send them over to the laser by themselves as a vector job at 1% speed. Once you do that, you're going to go over to the laser, and you're going to put your material in, and then you're going to simply run the job with the door open with the red dot pointer on. This is because you want to trace those printed circles with that vector circle job, and that is how you can actually align the material to be able to do the print and cut without the camera. And I'll show how I do this using my Epilog Fusion Edge with a very similar material where I did it with the gold printed version. And the biggest thing or biggest takeaway from this is you don't have to actually have a registration.camera to do print and cut. You just have to learn how to kind of hack the system to make it work for whatever option that you are using. I have the job sent over to the machine. What I'm going to do is turn on the red dot pointer. As long as you have the lid up, the machine won't fire. So I'm going to go ahead and run it, and the red dot pointer will trace the job. So all I'm going to do is move the material until it's outlining that circle. So this is going to take me a minute, but I'm going to line it up with the rest of the dots, and then I will show you what it looks like. Okay, so it's just running around the dots. I have it aligned probably as good as I'm going to get it manually. So we're going to go ahead and run it. It may be a little off when I do this, but let's try it and see what happens. Overall, you can see that it did turn out really well. The print is pretty well centered within the cut. This laser mag material does create some residue when it cuts, so you will have to clean it afterwards. Usually water wiping it down will work the best. As we wrap up this webinar, I want to recap some of the major tips and tricks that we've covered in this webinar, as well as some of the pitfalls that you can avoid. My biggest tip from the design side is to use that repeat function or a pattern function of some kind to fill out the whole bed so that you don't have to do all that copy paste, try to nest it manually. It helps speed up the design process significantly by doing that. Another tip on the design side is that you can either design with multiple artboards if you're not going to be using the registration.camera, or you can save them as different files. I typically like to do them as different artboards if I'm not doing the print and cut, but definitely like the separate files if I am doing the print and cut. Now, completely up to you, but I found that those work really well. From a printing standpoint, when you're dealing with a UV printer, my number one tip there is really about getting the best color pop. For me, I have found that the best results come from laying down that white undercoat, especially on darker or metallic materials, so that it really gives a nice solid base that the colors can print onto. I have found that I get a much more vibrant print and result by doing that. But, you know, underbase is not always needed, and it's not always something you want to do, but when you're doing an application like this, I highly recommend it. My second biggest one on the print side is making sure that you secure your material to the bed. And this is one of those very common pitfalls that happens, is as it's printing, just the movement of the head and slight things can shift the material ever so slightly if you don't secure it properly. You can use the vacuum table on the printer bed to do this, or you can use that sticky mat type material to help secure it as well. But I have found that if I don't secure anything and I don't use one of those methods, I have had items shift and it will actually do kind of like a double print look, to where it looks a little bit hazy, and you can avoid this by making sure that your materials are secure. On the laser side, there's really only a couple things here. The first one is ensuring that your firmware and your camera calibrations have been done recently. The firmware is mainly because you never know when they're going to release a new update or a new feature, and something might have been improved in the quality of the process or the camera. So definitely check those out. Make sure that you're pretty well up to date, and you'll get really good results. And honestly, the biggest one out of the whole video to me is that you do not have to have a registration dock camera to do print and cut. I think a lot of people get it in their head that, oh, I can't do it. It's not possible because I don't have that camera. That camera is really meant for a production environment where you are doing print and cut all the time. You have a consistent customer base, and you know that you're going to be doing hundreds, thousands, who knows how many items. If you just want to do a one-off or a couple time instance where you want to do print and cut as an application, you don't have to have that camera. And that's a really good thing to highlight here is you don't have to be intimidated. You can definitely do the manual process. And there is a video that I've made in the past that deep dives that whole process if you want to see it detail by detail. So with that in mind, I want to open up the floor for questions on anything that you might have print and cut related. And definitely be sure to try some of these tricks out for yourself. And I hope you have some really good results. Thank you again, and I'm glad you joined the webinar.